With respect, sir, you don't need help to sit in that chair. But if you want to stand, you'll need me. Sometimes the best get tired of trying.
I haven't.
Your glute and quad muscles still show residual activity.
General hadn't walked for 25 years, until the new black soldier did the impossible. The parade grounds of Fort Sterling were alive with the steady rhythm of boots pounding the dirt. Rows of soldiers drilled in perfect symmetry, their voices cutting through the morning air like blades. Left, 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 right, left. But then, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm faltered. One squad slowed, another stopped altogether, until the entire field of soldiers had stilled. Every eye turned toward a single spot. There, on the soft grass near the reviewing stand, Private First Class Nyla Carter knelt in silence, both hands gripping the tensioned straps of a heavy black knee brace. The metal gleamed in the sun, locked onto the stiff legs of a man who had not stood in 25 years. General Elias Strickland, the legend, the war hero, the man who had commanded battalions from a wheelchair, his chest weighted with medals that testified to decades of sacrifice. His silver hair was cropped with military precision, his square jaw locked in the familiar mask of discipline. His navy dress uniform was spotless, sharp against the dull steel of his chair. And yet, for the first time in years, the impossible was being whispered into existence.
Before we dive into this life-changing story, hit that subscribe button, like, and comment. If you're ready to have your perspective completely wowed, drop a comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from. You might be surprised to see who else from your area is tuning in right now.
"Private Carter," he said, voice low and cutting. "Step aside. That's an order." But Nyla did not move. The murmurs spread across the field, rippling through platoons like wind across tall grass. Young cadets froze mid-push-up. Sergeants stopped barking drills. No one had ever seen a private defy the general like this. She remained kneeling, her dark eyes fixed on the brace, her hands steady, unflinching. "With respect, sir," she said quietly, "you don't need help to sit in that chair. But if you want to stand, you'll need me." A hush blanketed the grounds. General Strickland's gaze narrowed. His eyes, sharp, battle-hardened, unreadable, studied her face as if searching for cracks in her resolve. For 25 years he had endured the whispers, the pity, the cruel hope dangled by countless specialists who promised progress, only to leave him with nothing but more disappointment. "You think I haven't been examined by the best?" he said coldly. Nyla looked up, her slim frame dwarfed by his imposing presence even from the chair. She was young, too young some thought, for this kind of defiance. Mid-20s at most, with raven hair pulled tight beneath her fatigued cap, her boots still too new, her rank non-existent beyond the single stripe that marked her as a private. Yet her voice did not waver. "Sir," she said evenly, "sometimes the best get tired of trying. I haven't." A few soldiers exchanged glances, some scoffing quietly. No one spoke to the general like that, not if they valued their career. "You're out of line, soldier." His voice had dropped into a dangerous register, but she didn't release the straps. "With respect, sir," she pressed on, "your glute and quad muscles still show residual activity. Weak, yes, but measurable. Your lower motor neurons are firing. That means the pathway is still alive." General Strickland blinked. For the first time in years, the words cut through the armor he had built around himself. His doctors, his world-class doctors, had stopped talking about possibility long ago. They managed pain, handed out prescriptions, adjusted the chair, but none of them dared speak of hope. But this young private just had. "You've built a life around that chair," she continued, "commanded from it, earned respect from it. But sir," she tightened the strap one last time, her eyes unwavering as she looked up at him, "you haven't finished what your body still wants to do." The silence stretched so long it became suffocating. The only sounds were the distant calls of crows and the creak of leather boots shifting uneasily in the grass. Strickland's jaw flexed, his fists clenched on his unmoving thighs. "You think I haven't tried?" "I think you haven't tried." The silence stretched so long it became suffocating. The only sounds were the distant calls of crows and the creak of leather boots shifting uneasily in the grass. Strickland's jaw flexed, his fists clenched on his unmoving thighs. "You think I haven't tried?" "I think you haven't tried again," she replied, voice steady as a blade. "Not since the last time someone told you to stop hoping, but sir, that someone wasn't me." For a long moment, neither moved. The general's chest rose and fell, his breathing controlled but heavy, like a man holding back a storm. Around them, hundreds of soldiers held their breath. Finally, with the faintest tremor of defiance in his own voice, he muttered, "You presume a lot for a private." She stood, not with arrogance, but conviction. "I was a neurorehabilitation tech before I enlisted," she said. "My unit specialized in retraining damaged systems. I've seen limbs move after years of silence. I've seen spines respond when every scan said no." He arched a brow, the corner of his mouth twisting into something between a scoff and disbelief. "And you think my spine will obey you?" "I think your mind already has," she countered softly. "Your body's just waiting for permission." The words hit him like a bullet, direct, piercing, undeniable. He wanted to shut her down, to dismiss her with a wave of his hand like he had done with so many others. But something in her calm, unwavering gaze anchored him. She wasn't trying to impress the crowd. She hadn't made a scene. She had simply seen him, not the general, not the wheelchair, but the man buried beneath 25 years of silence. "You don't know what it feels like," he said finally, his voice low, almost broken. "To fall in front of men who once saluted you." Her eyes softened. "I know what it feels like to be dismissed, to be looked through, to be told not to bother. I've lived it my whole life." His breath caught. For the first time in years, he saw not a soldier defying him, but a mirror of his own buried shame. Nyla straightened her shoulders. "Give me 30 days, sir. If I fail, you'll never hear from me again." The silence that followed was deafening. Every soldier on that field leaned forward in anticipation, as if the very air was hanging on his reply. General Elias Strickland, hero of the Iron March, survivor of the Dalkin ambush, legend of Fort Sterling, looked at her for a long time. And then, he gave the faintest of nods, a single, almost imperceptible gesture. But in that moment, the air shifted. Soldiers who had trained under him for decades knew what that nod meant. Permission. Nyla released the straps, stood tall, and quietly picked up her bag. She didn't smile, didn't boast. She just walked away. But every soldier present knew. They had just witnessed the first step. The next morning, just after 0600, the gymnasium in the rehabilitation wing of Fort Sterling smelled of dust and disuse. Equipment sat untouched, wrapped in the silence of years gone by. No one trained here anymore. No one, except one. Private Nyla Carter was already waiting, sleeves rolled to her elbows, sweat dampening her fatigues. She had scrubbed the parallel bars until they shone, unpacked resistance cords, adjusted padding. Her expression was focused, unwavering. When the gym doors opened, every squeak of the general's wheelchair echoed like a drumbeat. He rolled in, uniform pressed, jaw locked, eyes hard. He didn't salute her. He had told her not to. "The braces are warm and ready," she said, nodding toward the bars. 30 seconds. That's all we aim for today." He didn't answer, just wheeled forward, locked his chair, and let her begin. The gym smelled of iron, dust, and memory. It had once been Strickland's kingdom. He had trained cadets here, drilling them until their bodies broke and rebuilt themselves stronger. He had stood on these very floors barking orders, watching future soldiers sweat rivers into the mat. Back then, he had been a titan, his presence enough to silence a room. Now, he wheeled across the cracked linoleum, the squeak of rubber tires a mocking echo of what used to be the strike of polished boots. Nyla Carter moved with clinical precision, attaching stabilizers to his thighs, his knees, his calves. Her hands were quick, efficient, professional but never hurried. She worked with the quiet intensity of someone who believed the outcome was already certain, even if no one else did. "Tell me if anything feels wrong," she said, adjusting the last strap. "It already does," Strickland muttered. His voice was dry, but beneath it lingered the faint tremor of something he hated to admit: fear. Nyla didn't flinch. She stood beside him, slid one arm carefully around his back, and braced her feet against the mat. "When you're ready, sir, not before." His hands gripped the parallel bars. Metal bit into his palms, rough and cold. For 25 years, he had looked at those bars like gravestones, symbols of everything taken from him. Today, they stood like gates, daring him to step through. His arms trembled instantly. Not from weakness, his upper body was still a soldier's, sculpted from years of training in spite of his chair. The tremor came from something deeper, the memory of failure. Pain streaked across his spine, sharp and hot, his jaw locked. His breath hissed between clenched teeth. "Keep breathing," Nyla said quietly. "You've carried worse." He wanted to snap back, to remind her she had no idea what he had carried. The ambush in Dalkan Province, the convoy in flames, the screams of his men burning alive while he lay crushed under steel, praying for unconsciousness. He had carried the weight of survival, when survival had felt like betrayal. But he didn't say it. Instead, he shifted forward. His knees buckled instantly like paper. His chest lurched. Nyla tightened her grip at his side, anchoring him without hesitation. "Don't fight the fall," she whispered. "Breathe into it. Let the brace do its job." His jaw ground against itself. He could feel every soldier's gaze in his mind, their disbelief if they could see their general, trembling like a child. He hated it, hated the weakness, hated himself. But then, something. Pressure. Not movement, not strength, just weight. His knees locked, trembling, but they held. Seconds ticked. 10, 15, 20. Sweat drenched his temples. His shoulders shook, his spine burned. Every instinct screamed to collapse, to retreat back to the safety of the chair. At 30 seconds, Nyla leaned close. "Now sit, sir." He fell back into the wheelchair like a collapsing tower, his chest heaving, sweat soaking the collar of his uniform. He wanted to rage, to curse, to spit at her for putting him through that humiliation. But she knelt in front of him, steady, unflinching. "You did it." "I didn't move," he snapped, his voice like gravel. "You stood," she countered calmly, tugging off the straps one by one. "You bore your own weight. Your body remembered." His chest heaved again. He looked down at his legs, lifeless, foreign, the enemy he had carried longer than any war. His instinct was to deny her words, to protect himself from hope, the most dangerous battlefield of all. But he said nothing. The next morning, he returned. And the morning after that, and the one after that. It became a ritual. Every day at 0600, Strickland wheeled into the gym and found Nyla waiting, bars polished, braces warm, equipment ready. She was always there before him, always steady. Some mornings were worse than others. There were days the pain clawed up his spine like fire. Nights he couldn't sleep, haunted by memories of burning steel and men screaming for help he couldn't give. Days he cursed under his breath, shaking with rage at his body's betrayal. But she never flinched. She didn't offer pity. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't speak unless it mattered. She simply handed him a towel, reset the braces, and said, "Again." Slowly, 30 seconds became 60. 1 minute became 2. The trembling lessened. His breath steadied. His hands stopped shaking on the bars. By the 3rd week, something shifted. He arrived early, and for the first time, when Neela tightened the braces and stepped aside, he pushed forward himself. His arms strained, his back screamed, but his knees locked on their own. She stood a fraction farther away, watching. This time he did not need her hand. When he sat again, sweat pouring down his face, she only nodded. No applause, no false encouragement, just a simple, quiet truth. "You're getting stronger." That night, alone in his quarters, General Strickland caught his own reflection in the mirror. He hardly recognized the man staring back. His shoulders looked broader, his jaw sharper, his face leaner from the grind of daily battle. But it wasn't his body that stopped him, it was his eyes. For the first time in decades, they were alive. Not with pride, not with vanity, with presence. Something he thought he had buried on that battlefield had stirred again. Hope. By the 4th week, seconds no longer mattered. They counted steps. At first it was 2, awkward, clunky, every muscle screaming. Then 4, then 6. One morning, Nyla entered the gym to find the braces already strapped on. The general stood between the bars, hands gripping the steel, his jaw set. "You're late, Private," he muttered, sweat already gleaming on his forehead. She smirked. "Sir, I've been here, just watching." That day, he took 10 steps. The sound of his boots on the mat was thunder. A couple of soldiers paused their own workouts, watching silently. One clapped, another joined. The applause was hesitant at first, then grew into something undeniable. Word spread. The whispers turned into rumors. The rumors turned into stories. The general is walking again. By the end of the month, the gym could no longer hold the secret. They gathered on the same patch of grass where it had begun, where a private had once defied orders and told a legend he wasn't finished. At first, the soldiers thought it was a ceremony, a promotion, an award, some formal announcement. Instead, they watched as General Elias Strickland rolled forward, his wheelchair glinting in the sun. Silence fell like a blanket. He locked the wheels. He reached for his cane. And slowly, achingly, defiantly, he rose. Not with bars, not with braces, just his cane, just his body, just his will. 1,000 breaths held at once. Then, with Nyla standing quietly at his side, he took one step, and another. He turned toward his soldiers, straightened, raised his hand, and saluted. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then the silence shattered. Cheers erupted like thunder rolling across the field. Soldiers roared, chanted his name. Some wept openly. The air vibrated with the force of it, but Strickland only looked at one person. Nyla Carter. He took another shaky step forward, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a small silver medal. "Civilians don't know this one," he said, pinning it to her chest with trembling hands. His voice broke, but he did not care. "It's awarded to soldiers who restore what was broken. You didn't fix my body, Private. You fixed my will." Her throat tightened, but she stood tall. "I didn't come to fix you, sir," she said softly. "I came to remind you weren't finished." And for the first time in decades, Elias Strickland believed it. The roar of the crowd still echoed in General Elias Strickland's ears long after the ceremony ended. That moment, the step, the salute, the medal, was already becoming legend. Soldiers were replaying it on their phones, uploading shaky clips to their social feeds. By sundown, half the country would know. The Iron General walks again. But inside the base, not every cheer was genuine. Some smiles hid clenched jaws. Some applause came from hands that trembled with unease. For some men in power, Strickland's return to his feet was not a miracle. It was a threat. That night, Strickland sat in his quarters, cane resting against the desk, legs throbbing with the dull ache of overuse. The medal he had pinned on Nyla still gleamed in his memory. He had watched her hold back tears with the same discipline she showed in the gym. She reminded him of himself at 20. Fierce, steady, unwilling to accept the limits others tried to cage her in. But as he rubbed his knees, his instincts stirred. The instincts that had kept him alive in ambushes, that had warned him of betrayals before they struck. Something was shifting in the atmosphere of Fort Sterling. He felt it like a tremor before an earthquake. In another building across the base, Colonel Marcus Hale watched the shaky phone video of Strickland's salute on loop. His office was dark except for the glow of the monitor. The cheers on the recording grated against him like sandpaper. Each step the general took felt like a nail hammered into his carefully built plans. "Damn fool," Hale muttered. For years, Strickland's wheelchair had been a symbol of the past, a respected relic, a hero kept on the sidelines. Hale had risen in that vacuum, climbing the ladder with ruthless efficiency. He commanded the younger officers now. His word carried weight in the Pentagon's ears. But if Strickland was back on his feet, that changed everything. A standing Strickland meant influence, authority, power reclaimed. And power reclaimed meant Hale's ambitions were in danger. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, staring at the screen as the soldiers erupted into cheers. "This isn't your army anymore, old man," Hale whispered. "It's mine." The following week, the base buzzed with renewed energy. Strickland's daily sessions with Nyla became an open secret, drawing more soldiers each day who pretended to train, but lingered just long enough to catch a glimpse of the impossible unfolding. 2 weeks after the ceremony, he managed 15 steps with only his cane. Soldiers clapped. Some saluted. But amid the admiration, Nyla noticed the shadows. Not everyone was happy. She saw it in the glances exchanged by senior officers who lingered too long in the gym doorway. She heard it in the hushed conversations that stopped the second she entered the hall. And one evening, as she was scrubbing down the parallel bars, she found a note slipped under the door. "Walk away, Private, before you regret it." Her heart thudded, but her hands didn't shake. She folded the note neatly and tucked it into her pocket. The next morning, she didn't mention it to Strickland. Not yet. He had enough weight to carry. But Strickland knew something was coming. It started with small things. Resistance bands missing from the supply closet. The braces she used mysteriously misplaced, forcing them to waste hours retrieving replacements. One morning, the parallel bars themselves were unbolted from the floor, dangerously unstable until Nyla spotted it at the last second. "Sabotage," she said flatly, tightening the bolts with a wrench. "Or incompetence," Strickland muttered. "Sir, bolts don't loosen themselves." Their eyes met. Both knew the truth. Someone wanted him back in that chair permanently. Strickland's jaw clenched. Let them try. 2 nights later, Nyla was walking back to her quarters when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate. She reached for her flashlight, but before she could switch it on, a voice cut through the darkness. "You should have listened to the note." The beam of another flashlight snapped on, blinding her. She raised an arm, blinking against the glare. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows, faces hidden, uniforms stripped of insignia. Her pulse spiked. "Step aside, Private," one of them said. "The general doesn't need your games." She straightened her back. "I'm not stepping aside." The first man chuckled darkly. "Wrong answer." The attack was sudden, a shove to her shoulder, a hand reaching for her throat, but Nyla was faster than they expected. Before enlisting, she had worked neuro rehab, yes, but she had also grown up in neighborhoods where you didn't survive without knowing how to fight. She ducked the grab, twisted the man's wrist until he yelped and drove her knee into his gut. He staggered back. The second lunged. She slammed her flashlight into his jaw, cracking bone. The third grabbed her from behind, but she stomped hard on his instep and threw her elbow into his ribs. For a moment, she thought she might actually win. Then the first one recovered, pulled something from his jacket, and pressed it against her temple. Cold, metallic, a gun. Her breath froze. "Last warning," he hissed. "Walk away, Carter, or next time it won't be a warning shot." They shoved her hard against the wall and vanished into the shadows, leaving her gasping, her pulse hammering like war drums. The next morning, she arrived at the gym with a bruise blooming across her cheek. Strickland saw it instantly. "What happened?" His voice was sharp, commanding. "Nothing," she said too quickly. He gripped the bars, eyes narrowing. "Don't lie to me." She exhaled slowly. "Someone doesn't want you walking again." The fire in his chest ignited instantly. For the first time in years, it wasn't pain that fueled him. It was rage. "Names," he demanded. "I didn't see faces." His jaw tightened. "Cowards." She touched the strap on his brace. "Doesn't change our plan. 30 steps today." He looked at her, truly looked. A bruise on her face, fear in her eyes, but buried under it, a flame as fierce as his own. "Damn it, Carter," he muttered, lowering his voice. "They'll come after you harder next time." "Then we'd better make sure you're strong enough to stand without me," she replied. For the first time, he almost smiled. Colonel Hale watched from the balcony above, arms folded, expression unreadable as Strickland struggled through his steps. Each one was defiance. Each one was a dagger pointed at Hale's chest. He turned to the officer beside him, his most trusted aide. "Find out everything about Private Carter," Hale said coldly. "Her past, her family, her weaknesses. If Strickland thinks he can rise again, let's remind him how easy it is to fall." The aide nodded, already making notes. "And Colonel?" the officer asked quietly. "If he keeps walking?" Hale's eyes hardened into steel. "Then he won't keep walking for long." That night, Strickland couldn't sleep. The ache in his legs was nothing compared to the storm in his mind. He had survived ambushes, assassins, backstabbing politicians. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was rot inside his own ranks. He stared at the cane, leaning against the wall. Nyla Carter had risked everything to drag him back onto his feet. She had given him permission to believe again. And now, because of him, she was in danger. He clenched his fists. Whoever wanted him back in that chair had just made a mistake. They had forgotten who Elias Strickland was. The Iron General didn't back down. He fought back. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Neither of them wanted to be the first to speak. She sat on the far end of the couch, her hands gripping her knees so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression blank, but his mind was anything but calm. Every notification that had buzzed on his phone in the past 48 hours had been another dagger. Headlines dissecting his every word, online threads pulling apart his past, strangers reducing him to fragments of gossip. His once sterling reputation had become a battlefield, and in the middle of it all was her, still unraveling. She scrolled endlessly on her phone, every swipe like pouring salt into an open wound. She couldn't stop. She needed to see what they were saying. Each comment was worse than the last. "She's unstable, dangerous, a liar. He's probably guilty. Look at how quiet he's been. If this doesn't end soon, someone's going to get hurt." Her breathing became shallow. She didn't want to believe the words, but they sank into her like poison. Every lie written about her became another piece of the cage she felt trapped in. He watched her out of the corner of his eye. "You have to stop reading that," he finally said, voice steady but low. She snapped her head toward him. "How can I stop? It's everywhere. They're tearing me apart and you're just sitting there." "I'm not just sitting here," he replied sharply. "I'm thinking about how to handle this without burning everything down." Thinking? Her laugh was brittle, almost manic. While I drown, you're thinking? The wire between them snapped. That night, the storm inside her reached a breaking point. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of her vision. Whispers that weren't there echoed in her ears. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look like her anymore. It looked like someone hollowed out, someone desperate. In the middle of the night, she stood by the window, staring down at the city streets below. The lights blurred through her tears. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "There's no way back, only one way out." But then her phone buzzed again. Another message, another comment, another headline. And for some reason, instead of giving up, it triggered something darker, an obsession with proving them all wrong, no matter the cost. She grabbed her laptop and began typing furiously. Posts, screenshots, long, rambling threads. Her words mixed truth with venom, confession with accusation. She tagged people, dragged names into the mud, threw gasoline on a fire already out of control. By sunrise, her posts had gone viral. He woke to the chaos, his inbox flooded, his phone overheated with alerts. She had named names, friends, colleagues, even him in ways twisted beyond recognition. The fallout was instant. He confronted her, voice raw from lack of sleep. "Do you even realize what you've done?" She looked up at him with wild eyes, dark circles under them. "I saved us. I told them the truth. Now they'll see you're innocent." "Innocent?" His voice broke, anger mixing with disbelief. "You just painted me as the villain in half your posts. You've dragged everyone into this. You've set fire to everything." Her lips trembled. "I did it for you, for us." But he saw it clearly now. The line between devotion and destruction had vanished. She wasn't saving them. She was burying them both. The world closed in quickly. Lawsuits loomed. Public opinion turned sharper, crueler. Friends cut ties. Even those who had once defended him went silent, afraid of being dragged into the whirlwind she had unleashed. And through it all, she spiraled further. One moment crying in his arms, the next screaming that he didn't love her enough, then begging him not to leave, then accusing him of betrayal. The house felt smaller each day, the walls closing in. He found himself retreating to the quiet of his car, parked in the driveway, just to breathe, just to think, just to be away from the chaos she carried with her every second. But he couldn't stay away forever. He always came back. Something in him couldn't let go. Not yet. The breaking point came one evening when he found her standing in the kitchen with shattered glass at her feet, blood dripping from her palm. She had thrown a mug against the wall. "They'll never stop!" she screamed, voice hoarse. "They'll never stop until one of us is gone!" He froze, fear and pity twisting inside him. For the first time, he wasn't sure if she meant herself or him. The room was thick with silence after her words. He moved slowly, carefully, like approaching a wild animal cornered and terrified. He reached for a towel, wrapped her bleeding hand, his own shaking. "Please," he whispered. "We can't keep living like this." Her eyes softened for a moment, but then hardened again. "Then fight with me. Don't abandon me." But he knew then, truly knew, that fighting with her meant losing himself completely. The rest of that night stretched on endlessly. She wept until her body gave out, collapsing on the couch. He sat in the dim glow of the lamp, staring at her fragile form, wondering how they had reached this place, and wondering how much longer he could stay, because he knew the truth. One of them was going to break, and if he didn't make a choice soon, it might be both of them. It started with a single post, a shaky video uploaded at midnight to an anonymous account on a social media platform. The caption was short, blunt, and devastating. "This is what he did to me. The video was grainy, filmed from an odd angle, but it showed just enough. A blurred figure, a man with his build and posture, his voice barely audible in the background. The video didn't reveal the full context, but context didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, nuance is irrelevant. Perception is everything. By morning, it had spread across the internet like wildfire. Thousands of shares, hundreds of thousands of comments. Outrage fueled the algorithm. Every news outlet wanted the story. Every influencer had a take. And the more people debated it, the more the truth, whatever it actually was, became buried under the avalanche of opinions, assumptions, and accusations. His name trended worldwide. Hashtags swarmed with demands for his arrest. Old photos were dredged up, old interviews dissected, every expression scrutinized as though they were puzzle pieces revealing his true nature. Some fans defended him, calling it an obvious setup, but their voices were drowned beneath the fury of those convinced he was guilty. His silence. Through it all, he said nothing. Not a tweet, not a statement, not even a denial. At first, his silence infuriated the public. "Why won't he defend himself?" they shouted online. Silence is admission of guilt. But for those who knew him, or thought they did, his silence was more terrifying than words. He wasn't the type to stay quiet. He always had a rebuttal, a carefully crafted explanation, a way to turn the tide in his favor. For him to vanish completely meant one of two things. Either he was calculating something bigger, or he was broken beyond repair. Behind closed doors, his world was collapsing. Sponsors pulled out of contracts. His business partners distanced themselves, issuing hollow statements about letting justice take its course. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even family grew cold, ashamed of being associated with him. Alone in his darkened apartment, he scrolled endlessly, watching strangers tear him apart piece by piece. Every insult felt like a knife. Every accusation, even the ones too absurd to be real, clung to him like chains. The silence wasn't strength. It wasn't strategy. It was paralysis. He simply didn't know what to say anymore. Her unraveling. While the world sharpened its knives for him, she too was unraveling. At first, the rush was intoxicating. She watched the video go viral with a thrill she couldn't put into words. Finally, the world was listening. Finally, they saw her pain, her truth, or at least the version of it she had convinced herself was real. The sympathy poured in. Strangers sent her messages of support. Journalists begged for interviews. Activists called her brave. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't the forgotten girl orbiting his world. She was at the center of it. But with the attention came pressure. Questions. Scrutiny. People digging into her past, her relationships, her own inconsistencies. Some believed her without question, but others poked holes in her story. Why did she wait this long? Why is her evidence so vague? Why does she seem to be enjoying the spotlight? The cracks in her facade widened. At night, when the cameras weren't on her and the messages stopped flooding in, she was left with herself. And herself was a dangerous place to be. She replayed the lies she had told, the edits she had made to the video, the pieces she had twisted. The more she thought about it, the harder it became to separate truth from fabrication. Did she even know what really happened anymore? Or had she rewritten the story so many times that her mind had turned fiction into memory? Her obsession with him had consumed her for so long that she didn't know who she was without it. And now, even in his ruin, she wasn't satisfied. Because in some dark, unreachable part of her, she still wanted him. The confrontation. It happened by accident or fate. They ran into each other weeks later, in the most unlikely of places, a quiet parking lot outside a grocery store. He was thinner, paler, a shadow of the man he used to be. She was jittery, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. For a moment, neither spoke. The world had built an entire mythology around them, but here they were, stripped of headlines, just two broken people staring at each other. Finally, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to stay quiet." His laugh was hollow, bitter, and you weren't supposed to lie. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no apology in them. Instead, there was desperation. "I didn't lie. Not completely. You made me feel invisible. You made me feel like I didn't matter. And now you know what it's like." He shook his head. "You didn't destroy me because I ignored you. You destroyed me because you needed me too much. You think this makes us even?" She stepped closer, trembling. "I needed you to see me, to hear me, to love me." His silence was heavier than any words. And then, something shifted in her expression, a flicker of madness. She reached into her bag, her hand closing around something sharp, metallic. But before she could act, headlights swept across the lot. A car pulled in. The spell broke. She froze. He backed away.
If this story meet your interest, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time someone saw your worth when others didn't, or about a time you chose to see someone else's value when the world told you to look away. Subscribe for more stories that will challenge your assumptions, touch your heart, and remind you that the most powerful force in the universe isn't money or fame or success. It's love. It's courage. It's the decision to treat every person you meet as if they might be the hero of their own incredible story.